Welcome back to another episode. I'm going to run through today how to align your long-term training goals with what you value as a person. Now, when we go and we look at life as a whole, everyone is going to have different seasons in different periods. And as we evolve through our journey, we're going to value different things. We're going to want different things. So in saying that, when we look at training by default will have to go through different iterations to evolve with you. Now, something I am really passionate about is making sure that the training journey actually does evolve. I see a lot of people come into training and they, stuck in a specific method or a certain way of training that they really, really like. And you can almost see it building. You can almost see the internal conflict building, that their values, their vision, their goals are changing, but they're stuck doing something that isn't necessarily conducive to their long-term plan, their values, or where they want to go. Now, how you train in your 20s and 30s is probably going to be very different to how you train in your 40s and your 50s. Now, in saying that, all training as a whole has very similar aspects. We're building strength, building muscle mass, working on mobility, fitness, power, all those components. But the real difference is where are you going to direct most of your energy? Where are the key areas that you want to focus on at periods of time? Because you can only focus on so many things at any one particular time in all aspects of life. So from a training standpoint, what you value, you really want to sort of dial in on that and then align your training so you're actually getting the most out of it. I, from a personal perspective, I went through a massive value shift 6-8 years ago now. I was, deep into powerlifting. I was competing, national comps, really enjoying myself and, have nothing negative to say about it. But I got to a point where I was opening up my business, and I wanted to wear a different hat, and I had to kind of make a decision. Now, where am I going to place my energy? I absolutely could have continued powerlifting and building the business, but I decided that the best move for me and what I actually really wanted to do and what I valued was to just go all in on the business. Training is way too important for me. I honestly believe it's the biggest vehicle of growth for most people. It's the linchpin that holds everything together for a lot of people. I think in this world, the way that society is set up, it's one thing that people can really control the output by directly controlling the input. And I think, in this day and age where technology is absolutely amazing, but everything is at our fingertips. It's accessible instantly. Training is one of those things that you really have to work for, and you have to really want and put systems in place in order to achieve great things. And it teaches us so many lessons, but it's the lessons that we get from that I see the positive sort of flow and effect into your life. And, I see a lot of younger people that come through, a lot of people that have been sort of jumping between fitness programs come through and they finally find a structured way of training and go, this is awesome. I'm making so many moves in the gym, but I'm also making moves outside of life as well. Now, one of the tricky things before we get into the bread and butter of today, one of the tricky things with training is a lot of lifters often really tie their self-value into this training. So if there's a bad day, there's a bad training session, there's a bad outcome for whatever reason that is, it absolutely ruins them. They spiral down into an emotional mess. And I think, maybe in your 20s, because you haven't sort of cemented who you are, what you value, and you may not be able to look at it as objectively as you should be, you're a lot more emotionally attached to it. Where I think as you mature and you get through it a little bit, you're looking at training as a vehicle. You're looking at it as, okay, well, how do I want to feel? How do I want to act? What are the qualities that I want? And then you're just aligning yourself with it. So it's not so emotional anymore. It's more about an ROI, return on the investment of the time and the effort that you actually put into it. So what I've done, I'm going to break it down, and I'm going to start off today with, in order to be true, you need to define what it is that you actually value. What is your end game? And I think it's a question that a lot of people actually rarely ask. I think maybe as they go through a journey or something happens, they may sit down and go, okay, well, what do I actually want from my training? But a lot of the time people get into training just more so on a surface level, kind of I want to lose a couple of kilos, or, maybe they haven't vocalized it yet, but the reality is most people get into training because it's a growth vehicle. Maybe they want to lose some body weight, but it's not about the body weight. It's about feeling more confident. It's feeling better. Maybe they're craving relationships or, being in different friend groups. That's the real catalyst. That's the value. That's the why. Or if, someone had been bullied at school, they want to get strong, feel physically capable. Now, they may not vocalize this and they actually may not have even thought about it, but I think in order to be true, how do you want to feel? So I think the first step of any real good training journey is to go, what are the actions that I actually need to do every single day in my training week, in my training program, and in my life for that to be true? Now, for someone that wants to focus on, composition, body weight, how they look, for that to be true, you're going to have to forget about the body weight for now. Think about your actions that you're doing. I need to eat in a way that I'm either eating too much so that I'm in a surplus, so that I'm putting on weight, or I'm restricting food, so I'm not eating as much and I'm dropping weight. Your actions that you do every day need to be aligned with that. If I'm training, and I'm taking 3 to 5 to 6 minute rest periods between all of my exercises, but my goal is composition, is that the best use of time in terms of return on investment? Could I be doing things that, may not be pushing as much weight in terms of strength, but I'm doing more overall output in terms of sets and reps? That energy expenditure is going to further add to output, which is going to further put you into a deficit. So we need to go, well, what are the daily actions that I need to do that is actually going to get me closer to my goals? It's not like the outcome. The outcome, I honestly believe is like, yes, of course you're going to get that. Yes, you're going to drop weight. Yes, you're going to get stronger. That's given if you're following a really structured training program. But it's more the actions that you have day to day that you need to do to align yourself with the style of training that you want. Now, when we have a look at the training journey, it is, like I've said, is just a vehicle of growth. And a large chunk of the time that you're training, you want to have enjoyment and fulfillment in that actual training itself. So how do you actually want to train? Like when you're training, do you want to be lifting heavy? Do you want to be lifting more reps? Like it's a serious consideration because not everyone feels the same about lifting certain type of, weight. Some people really might enjoy lifting 10 to 20 reps, where someone might actually just feel like they like lifting 3 to 5. Now that in itself is an action. How do I prefer to train? And it's a serious consideration. And then you need to look at and go, okay, well, my current training plan now, does my plan actually align with what I want? And in a lot of cases, I'm going to say no, because a lot of people haven't vocalized or they haven't actually sat down with a pen and paper and actually gone, well, what is value to me? What is true for me? And in order for that to happen, what would need to be? Now, when we, a real life example of this is, if you wanted to be a powerlifter, say the top 1% powerlifter in the world, and you could only train for 1 hour because you had a really, really busy job and you can only train for 1 hour, but you had to train between 5 and 6, 5 days a week. You've got to be realistic with it as well. Like, does that sound like a conducive environment for you to actually make the progress that you need to be in that top 1%? The likelihood is no. You're going to need more time for training for one. 2, we know that training first thing in the morning is just like your back feels stiff, your body feels stiff. It takes you a little bit to get going. And, someone that's training for strength and someone that's really pushing the numbers up, it may take them 30 to 40 minutes to even get to working weights. And that's not looking at any other exercises within their training program. So, if you have constraints in your training program, such as an hour first thing in the morning, you probably need to be a little bit realistic and go, okay, well, I can't actually do that either. So you've also got to look at training and go, well, what are the constraints that I actually have in terms of time, in terms of resource, in terms of management, and factor that into this as well. Like a real life example for me is, I train, I go through different seasons of where I train, but, I actually set a timer now for my training sessions. I don't want to spend any more time than 60 minutes in the gym from start to finish, where years ago, I used to be able to train for 2 or 3 years time, but time is not a luxury that I have anymore. And that's a choice. That's a choice. I could make more time if I wanted to, but I would much rather be spending time with my family, spending time with my kids, my wife, working on my business, working on my own personal growth and development. And quite frankly, I can figure out a way to make it all work within an ecosystem. So you need to define what it is, the point here. You need to define what it is that you want and what you value, and then you actually need to reverse engineer your training to suit. So if we move into the next point, that's exactly what we need to do. So one of the biggest thing here is what I was just speaking about day splits and stuff like that. You need to figure out how much time per week you can actually dedicate to training. And I'm going to be real with you here. Being realistic and undershooting is always the best key. If you come in and, you're really motivated for whatever reason, and you're like, man, I'm going to do 6 days a week. I'm going to do 90 minutes every single morning, but you're not a morning person and you probably don't have 90 minutes every single morning to do. You're setting yourself up for failure. So what I often say to people is undershoot and win. Go in at like 3 days and work really, really hard, really, really effectively, and get the process in place. Get your system in place for you, because there's something very, very powerful about winning. When you start winning and when you start stacking up those wins, you want more, because it's really addictive. And you're like, I am doing really well. And to be completely fair with you, most people who are in training are quite systemized and quite meticulous about how they approach things. So there is something very great about looking at your program at the end of the week, knowing that you've completed the whole thing, you've ticked all the boxes and you've filled it in. So the moral here is win first, because when you start to add those into your training world, into your life, into your system, it's very easy to then go, okay, well, I'm doing 3 days really well now. I'm going to add in a 4th day, or I'm going to add in 2 cardio days, or whatever it is that your goal is. It's very easy to layer up than it is to pull back, because it's very motivating. Now, when we have a look at training programs as well, we also need to look at not just how many days a week you can train. It's how long per session, realistically, from start to finish with travel time, you can train. Where are you going to fit it in? Now, for instance, a lot of people that, say work in the city or, have big and stressful jobs like to get training done first thing in the morning, which actually is amazing, right? It's a great time to do it. It sets your day up. You've got a lot of clarity, and then you can go in and slay your day. That's great. But you also need to be realistic with these types of training sessions, right? Like if you come in, like I was saying before with the powerlifting example, first thing in the morning probably isn't that conducive to max strength. So how are you going to align your training sessions to align with those training sessions? So, anyone from my team that trains, for the most part, if they train first thing in the morning, I reverse engineer their program for them. I have all their accessory exercises first, because they're asleep still. Their body's kind of getting, movie first thing in the morning. So I get them to do all the smaller, more isolated accessory exercises, which are typically at the end of the program first. It gets the muscle patterns moving, their nervous system starts to wake up, they might feel a little bit more fresh. So then as they start to move into the exercises, which are bigger exercises, whether they're the big compound movements, single leg exercises, whatever it may be, they're actually a lot more alert. They're a lot more switched on, and their body can handle the stress and the load a little bit more, because it's not like they've just rolled out of bed and gotten straight into training and just it's gone 100%. They've had like a build up period to it. So it's looking at, how many days a week you can train, but then it's also looking at how you train within that split, within your time allocation. Now, if you have the luxury of, 90 minutes or 2 hours to train, you may still follow a normal order first thing in the morning. That's great. Kudos to you. A lot of people that train first in the morning do not. They're doing it first thing in the morning. So because it's a non-negotiable for them. It's something that they value. It's something they want. And it has to be in front loaded in the day. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. So once you've figured it all out and you've figured out, where you're going to train, put it in your diary. And then the best thing that you can do is make sure that you actually have it scheduled in every single week as a non-negotiable, because I look at training as the biggest form of self-respect, right? Like, you want to be healthy. You want to live a good lifestyle. You want to be, you want to be fit. You want to be mobile. And if it's not something that you truly value as a non-negotiable, you probably haven't actually tapped into what it is that you actually value yet, right? So it's a massive form of self-respect, because, I'm a big believer that you need to show up for yourself first. And people go, oh, I'm selfless, I only care about other people. That's bullshit. I'm telling you right now, the better that you show up for yourself, be a bit selfish. Dedicate time to improving yourself, improving what it is that you want, even if it rustles feathers within your friend group, within your family group, because at the end of the day, you have to sit with yourself. And I honestly believe that training is the first part of that. Like, a little story here is when I first started training, like properly training, I was a chef, and I used to start at like 10 or 11 in the morning, and I couldn't believe the amount of resistance that I actually copped as a result of training. Like, you almost get mocked, like, oh yeah, you're going to the gym. You're like, you want to get buff. And it's like, mate, who cares? My reasoning and my rationale for going to the gym, and who are you to place judgment on this? But the funny thing is, it's like whenever you make a change in your life, whenever you do something that your current group of friends or your family group don't understand, you almost get ridiculed for it. So you as a person really need to know what your why is and the values around it and why you do it, because there'll be a period of time when no one understands what you're doing. And the example when, I was cooking, no one knew what I was doing, but I persisted with it and I kept going. I just stopped speaking about it, right? Like, I was like, all right, cool. If you guys don't get it, I just won't even waste my time and energy with you. And another example is on this as well is like, I don't really drink. I have a glass of wine every now and again, but if you go out and you don't order an alcoholic drink at a social event and you just get like a sparkling water or a Coke, people are like, what's wrong with you? Oh, is it because you're a gym buff? It's, you're one of those gym junkie guys. It's like, no, I just don't need to drink to have a good time. And I actually respect my health over here, my friend. So the moral of the story here is whatever you value, you actually need to fight for. And the biggest thing that you can do is actually put it into your schedule weekly. So it's a non-negotiable. So you show up first for yourself. Now, to wrap things up for today, I don't want to shit on small group training because that's not what this message is. But I see a lot of people pick the best of a bad bunch. Now, what this means is I see people coming into our facility and they've been training for quite a few years. We're not that often we're people's first point of call. They come to us once they've jumped around to different gyms, they're injured, they're kind of burnt out, they're not really enjoying training, and they actually want to make some meaningful progress in terms of strength, technique, and progression around all of that, right? Something simple that works. Now, we pick people up there, and a lot of the time I ask them, I'm like, so why were you doing, the group training? Why were you here? Why were you there? And a lot of the time it's because it's economical. It's cheaper. You're booked into a class or a time where people are expecting you, and it's convenient in a sense that there's classes running. So you can kind of just jump in, jump out, and not really think about it, right? Now, that is good, but the reality is a lot of these gyms aren't set up with the type of equipment that is sustainable for long-term training. Like, if you think of these high-intensity gyms, every single session is just 100% capacity. Like, you're pushing. And people end up with niggles, they end up getting burnt out, they end up hating training and just stopping training in general because they're like, training's bad for you, or, every time I train, this hurts, or, I just feel exhausted all the time. But the reality is it's these training systems and these environments are not set up for success. They're not set up for long-term training. They're set up for a business model, and they're set up to maximize the bottom line. Now, again, this is not a business chat, but yes, business needs to make money. But a lot of people, the point that I'm trying to make here, pick convenience over actually going, you know what? I need to learn how to train properly. I need to develop the skill. I need to put myself in these positions where I can learn the skills, and then I actually have the skill for life. So, the moral of the story here is pick the right environment, go and find the people that absolutely intimidate you, that you're like, wow, I don't fit into that. I want that. I want to be in that arena, but I don't feel like I'm good enough. Go and train there. Even if it's a significant investment in terms of your personal capital, if you're in the right environment, you should be learning so much skill and development and programming along the way that you're actually making your coach redundant over time. So it's actually an investment into you. So if you spent 3 years flopping around doing absolutely pointless training, making no meaningful progress, and kind of feel like you're in the same spot, but you go and spend those 3 years of investment in terms of capital on 1 year of training at a spot that is literally going to give you more results than you've made in the last 3 years, that for me is the best return on investment. Like, for me, when I look at training, like my clients are educated, they're smart. Like they come to me with serious questions, and that's not a flex on me. That's just, I've done my job. I've given them the tools that they need to absolutely kill it. And, by default, a lot of them end up being coaches and practitioners as well, because they're actually so inspired by what their training journey has done for them, because it's aligned with their values. And, I think the fitness industry as a whole needs to take a big look at itself, because we're obviously focusing on trivial outcomes. Now, look, weight loss isn't trivial, but losing 10 kilos in 10 weeks is absolutely trash. That is not sustainable. That is not long-term. And that is not something that anyone should really be aspiring to unless you're morbidly obese. But the reality is you're actually doing training to help work on health outcomes, work on your mental health outcomes, and become a better person. Training and the outcome of it is like a no shit. It's a byproduct of what you do. So the reality is here, training needs to be specific. It needs to be specific for what you need to do. It needs to be specific towards an outcome. But the layer above that is, what do you want to get out of training? You as a person, what do you value? And where do you want to go with training? And know that there are seasons in training. Like what is valid now may not be true in 2 or 3 years' time. You may be competitive in sports, but in 2 and 3 years' time, you want something with a little bit more of a lifestyle approach. So don't get trapped in that window where your whole identity is locked in to your style of training, because you should evolve as a person. And as you evolve as a person, your training also should follow suit. Now, that's it for today's episode. I'll see you guys on the next one.